the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Hello, Arizona Cardinals fans, and welcome to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, the USA Today's NFL Wire site that covers the Arizona Cardinals. With me in this review show is Seth Cox, my co-host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, the SB Nation Arizona Cardinals site, and also one of the hosts of the original Draft Breakdown podcast. And now, you know, he's a championship-winning coach, too, assistant coach for his youth teams. So congrats to that, Seth.
Yeah. I mean, that's the fun part, right? Just getting the kids out there, teach them how to play football and stuff like that. So, yeah, 3 years as a head coach and 3 championship games and 2-1 in the championship. So
that's
not
good
bad
stuff.
One year left, then I can retire forever.
Absolutely. This is episode 497. We are almost at episode 500 after 10 and a half years of shows. And we are going to focus this episode on the Cardinals' loss to the San Francisco 49ers, a 45-29 defeat. They did not cover the spread, which was disappointing. I was hoping for I was hoping for that onside kick and a desperation touchdown to get it to the cover, but they didn't give that. They blew the over. If you followed our props, Jake Moody, definitely got over 3.5 extra points. Laddering Connor's numbers is good. Christian McCaffrey's number also good. Yeah, it was pretty much if you had money on our props, you made money, but except for the spread.
Yeah, and the big ones, like you said, the plus money bets with Prater field goals made, that hit in the first half, and then Moody extra points made, that hit early in the third quarter, and then probably should have gone with McCaffrey. Like I went Purdy 2 touchdowns just to see if it would happen. Plus 4,500. Put $1 on it, win $45. Nothing to complain about.
For me, it was James Conner. Like my game picks, I went 0 for 3 on all my underdog picks. I'm in a bit of a rut. I'm 2 and what am I now? 2 and 11 in my last 12 pick. 2 and 10 in my last 12 picks in the last 4 weeks. I missed on the Cardinals and covering, but my James Conner bets got me even for the weekend when I laddered the over the 51.5, and then I took the 60 plus and I took the 70 plus, and that 44-yard run made me feel good for the weekend, at least for my wallet.
Yeah, and you look at it, we couldn't have. We talked a lot about Christian McCaffrey's over in his total yardage. I don't think either of us saw him leading the 49ers in receiving yardage in that game. You think about it, Purdy threw for 242 yards, and the receiving leader was Christian McCaffrey with 72. George Kittle had 54 on 2 catches. Debo had the targets for Debo and Ayuk were there. They didn't get the big plays that we were expecting.
Debo did get 2 touchdowns, and that first touchdown that was absolutely uncut. I'm pretty sure Buddha made a mistake on that and then got caught in the wash on that. But
and then in the second one with Christian McCaffrey, the other wide open touchdown, you saw Jalen Thompson, lose his coverage in what looked like cover 3, and he didn't stay deep on that.
No,
and,
that one was interesting because he was kind of damned if he did, damned if he didn't.
But you always got to remember in that situation, you'd rather give up a long run or be able to come up and hit Brock Purdy than
the 80,000-yard touchdown. Purdy overthrows him. He leaps up, makes the catch, falls over, gets back up, and gets in the end zone untouched. That wasn't a very good play. But if you're talking about draft position. This was kind of what you wanted to see. You wanted to see the Cardinals play relatively well and lose the game. They didn't lose any. They didn't lose any standing with the draft. They're still a number 3. The Texans picked. The stupid Texans beating the Titans. I didn't know what the Titans were doing. They had a nice, comfortable lead, and they go and lose the game in overtime. And the Texans pick moved down to number 17. But let's start off by talking about the positives in the win against the 49ers, because, you know, in both games, now this time they scored, you have to look at the offensive production, because number one, they had a season high in yards and a season high in points, and they did it against one of the very best defenses in the league, asterisk, without their 2 best defensive tackles. But nonetheless, they took advantage of that. And that was a very positive thing to see.
Yeah, and that was the thing, is like we're finding positives in building blocks as the season continues, and I think that's the big thing. I mean, you know, we looked at it. It wasn't the best game from Kyler Murray, and we'll get to that, but it was also a game where, like, you look at it and he wasn't the reason they lost. He did a nice job. You know, he missed a couple throws. You know, the first pick I look at, and that's one of those situations where it's tough, because if the receivers are creating separation like they're supposed to, then Trey McBride's open, because
well, and also if the receivers are creating separation on the cross, they have that throw and they have the first down. Easy.
Right. And Charvarius Ward can't, because that wasn't even Ward's guy. That was the crazy thing, is that the Cardinals receivers just kind of ran flat routes and didn't create any separation or opening. And so he was able to come back. It was a hell of a play by Ward. He was able to come off his guy and make that play. You know, and so you look at that and it's like, then the 49ers are just going to sell out to stop the running game, right? And I don't think they did necessarily. I know that they packed the box quite a bit. They run blitz quite a bit, but they didn't. I wouldn't say they like basically loaded the box with 8 guys the whole game and dared Arizona to throw the ball. But they, you know, there were very few 5-6 man boxes. They were going up against mostly 6-7 man boxes in the game. And, you know, being able to run against that defense, I know they were without Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead, but you look at it and that's what they should have been doing, right? Like,
right.
They're without their 2 star interior players. I mean, we can make as many jokes as we want about the Cardinals defensive line situation, but the 49ers, I mean, Hargrave and Armstead are probably better than every duo in the NFL, maybe outside of Philly, but Philly's hasn't been good lately. So maybe they're just the best duo in the, like, that's how good those guys are. So it's nothing, you know, it's not the normal week where we're like, oh, well, these guys would start on. No, these guys would probably start everywhere in the NFL.
Yeah, absolutely.
and so, you know, to see them rise up and really dictate the game, and that's when you knew the Cardinals really had no chance at a comeback, right? I mean, let's just be honest. They basically said, hey, we're going to hold the ball for 34 minutes, and so this doesn't get out of hand. And, you know, their defense just is awful. I mean, there's no other.
And we will talk about the defense specifically, but yeah, what the Cardinals, they absolutely needed a stop or a turnover, and they couldn't afford the turnovers on offense. But that's right. Again, we're talking about, we want to focus on the positives right now. And
yeah, and so, like, you look at it, I mean, their rush game was I mean, and again, these are all, you know, semantic based arguments and things like that, but Pro Football Reference does their, you know, expected points thing. And their rush offense only trailed the 49ers pass offense in terms of expected points in the game. I mean, their rush offense was expected points just under 12, 11.77. Now, again, how good was the 49ers passing game? Doubled that. It was 22.4. So like their passing game was out of this world, but the Cardinals rush offense did more than enough to give the Cardinals a really, good chance to win the game. But like Jess said, like you can't, even if you're running that well, and I'll say this too, like I don't want to take anything away from what the Cardinals accomplished in that game because I thought there was a lot of great things, but you do also wonder if the 49ers are like, okay, aren't they going to just start flinging the ball around? And I mean, they were just patient and they ran the ball 30 times in the game. The 49ers, who won by 3 scores, ran the ball 26 times in the game. Like that's a baffling situation. The Cardinals won the yardage battle.
Yeah, there were good metrics to that. So they were okay on third. They faced a ton of third downs. They weren't terrible on third down. They outgained the 49ers 436 to 406. They had more offensive plays. They outgained them in the rush game. They had 234 rushing yards. They won time of possession 34-11 to 25-49. And they were 100%. Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the field goals. They hit the field goals. But yeah, there's lots of good things. And I think the best thing about the run game is that, and I think that's been the most exciting thing about the run game this year, is been the explosiveness that they're getting. It's not just that they're getting some consistency, but they're also breaking off big runs. I mean, you had James Conner's 44-yarder. You had Emari Demercado have a 49-yarder. Michael Carter had a 19-yarder. Kyler had a 15-yarder. They're staying on schedule with it, and I will say that Connor was grinding it out. He averaged 3.2 yards per carry on the other 13 that he had. But that's the thing is they're not getting stuffed for nothing. They're getting positives, and then they break the big ones. That's something we really haven't seen from a Cardinals offense really ever. This many explosives.
Well, and that's the craziest thing about this stat in this game was that you look at the top 5 big plays from scrimmage. The Cardinals were 1, 2, and 4. The 49-yard run by Emari Demercado, the 44-yard run by James Conner. McCaffrey had that 41-yard reception, but then Trey McBride had a 38-yard reception as well. So, like, 3 plays of 35 yards or more in a game is really, really good. Positives on offense. And that's, again, the expectations were incredibly low coming into this game. And I know you can't take the Kyler pick 6 out of it, but you take the Kyler pick 6 out of it and they 38-29 is not bad.
No, and in the end that would have been a cover.
right
which is better than we could have expected. I mean, really.
And they still kept it less than the 17 I expected. I said 16.5. They kept it under 16, or they kept it at 16. So that was, surprising. And again, they fell on a 2-point conversion again,
Stop going for 2. God.
Well, either that or just hire Cliff back just to run 2-point conversion attempts, and that's it.
They are so, it's just so frustrating.
Don't give them any other job other than, hey, you design 2-point conversion plays.
I think we have to. I think we also have to. We have to. I mean, it is obligation to talk about the play of Trey McBride, who had 10 catches for 102 yards. Okay. Now remember, we went 34 years to the day between 100-yard games from a tight end, and now within about a month, Trey McBride has 2, and he is just absolutely, like, he's shooting up, like, partially because there's no one else doing anything, but it's not just that, because he is becoming a focal point. Defenders are paying attention to him, and he's still producing. And right now, and so we look at that as a positive, how he's playing. It's part of the negative, but the Cardinals' offense right now, looks like the Baltimore Ravens offense from a couple of years ago, except for the fact that the defense is no good. They're running the ball really well. The tight ends are producing. In fact, it was another kind of a ridiculous stat. They had 26 completions, 22 of them went to running backs and tight ends. The receivers, and we'll talk about the receiver production later, is one of the negatives. But, I mean, Trey McBride had a great game. Elijah Higgins, 4 catches for 44 yards. He had a touchdown, and a lot of that came after Jeff Swain left. And Jeff Swain had himself a nice lucky 26-yard pass when there's a throw to McBride.
Yeah.
He got interfered with, but then the ball bounced off of him and right into the hands of Swain. And so that went for 26 yards. And so they got big production. I mean, they ended up with 172 yards just from the tight ends.
Yeah, and you look at it, and there's a lot that we can discuss, obviously, but and we'll get to the negatives shortly. But it's crazy to think that this is a offense built around running the ball, play action pass to the tight end game. And so then you look at certain things and you look at different situations and you say, there's a lot of positive to build on this. The offensive line isn't, great in pass protection, but they're starting to bully teams in the run game. They have a very diverse running group between the power of Connor, the patience of DeMercado, the electric.
He's slippery and fast.
I mean, somebody, actually one of my oldest son said, he reminds me a lot of Andre Ellington. I was like, hey, that's a very, good kind of callback. Like, hey, give this guy 7 touches a game. He's going to get you 70 yards. And people are going to be like, you need to give him 20 snaps, 20 touches a game because he's going to average 200 yards. And then you'd be like, oh, wait, he's going to average on 20 touches. He's going to average 80 yards a game because he's not going to, and then he's not going to play either. So, and then obviously the dynamic running ability of Kyler. And we didn't even talk about that much in this game. Because you look at it, I mean, Kyler ran 6 times for, I think, 48 yards. 49. Yeah. So, that's what I'm saying. Like, you get the grinded out. Like you said, the one big run kind of skewed James's stats from the game in total, but you get and same for DeMercado, but DeMercado was on pace for about, 5 yards per carry in the game. Connor was going to hit between 3.5 and 4, depending on how kind of those last ones went. You get Kyler at about 8 yards per carry, and then Michael Carter at 9 yards per carry, and then you throw in, Carter. They don't run. That's where the biggest drop off is they don't run the screen game well yet. And again, I think that comes from the lack of athleticism at the offensive line, something we can talk about after the season's over and things like that. But, going straight ahead, this offensive line seems really, really good. They're just going to have to get better at straight drop back protection and moving in terms of the screen game. But if you've got a really good run game and you can tweak those pieces and you go, hey, okay, we get we swap PJ to the left side and DJ goes, or we give DJ one more year and we find a suitable kind of Will Hernandez type at left guard, and all of a sudden your line's set for at least one more year and you can upgrade that. Because, I mean, you look at this game, Tristan Colon and Elijah Wilkinson, they didn't split snaps. I think it was more close to 70-30 in favor of Colon. But it's just, I mean, it's clearly not, it's still not working. But I think you've got good pieces. Froholt's fine. I mean, obviously upgradable, but he's not the disaster he was, 3 weeks ago?
Right.
4 weeks ago. Hernandez and Paris Johnson are your best 2 linemen. I mean, it's not even really a question. And then a lot, we can talk about DJ again at the end of the year. But I want to kind of give him some grace with the revolving door at left guard. He hasn't had anybody that's been good next to him consistently. And so it does make it tough on the tackle when you are coming off an injury, when you're getting up there in age, and now all of a sudden you basically are having to bail out your teammate every single play because he's just not up to the task. And so I'll give him some grace on that. And that, like you said, that is just such a, when was the last time we looked at the Cardinals and go, hey, they have a really, really strong running game that they can build around. They have a borderline, and, we're not there yet, but borderline on the precipice of great tight end with, that we're talking about. We will start talking about him in the Kittle, Kelsey, Andrews conversation if he finishes the last 3 games like he's played these past 7 and then starts next year on that same plane. Like, all of a sudden you're talking about like, oh man, those things that they've never had in place, they're in place. And while getting a great wide receiver is not easy, they're much more plentiful than when you're talking about great tight ends and a really good run blocking offensive line. And so like it's much easier to plug in a wide receiver than it is those other 6 positions that we just mentioned. So I think those are incredibly positive things to look at, because again, I don't want to take anything away, because Javon Hargrave and Eric Armstead are without a doubt the most elite duo of interior defensive linemen in the NFL. But I mean, there were plays where they made Nick Bosa, Fred Warner, Chase Young, Dre Greenlaw, like they made all of these guys look bad. And that is, I think you have to be like understanding like, yeah, it sucked that they got their doors blown off, but if they could get like 2 stops on defense, this is a whole different type of conversation.
Absolutely. Coming up next on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's move on, and unfortunately, more of the rest of the show is kind of the gross stuff. First up, wide receiver production. That's coming up next on Rise Up See Red. We're back on the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best of Cardinals talk on the web. The wide receiver position right now has been kind of a disaster. A little for the last little while. Michael Wilson back in action after missing 4 of the previous 5. Hollywood Brown catchless in 2 consecutive games. He's basically been invisible for the past 3 games. The Rams game, he was fantastic. And then since then, the last 3 games have been dealing with, basically last month, a heel injury that just he can't get over. And Gannon pointed to, and I think we've mentioned this. So while we look at the last 3 games and his lack of production, we look at his numbers overall and how, meager they are for supposed to be their top receiver, their number 1. And we recognize that outside of these 3 games, that in terms of film, he's had a fantastic year. He's been cooking players, he's been cooking defenders, and his place on this offense is kind of critical because his presence opens things up for other because schematically what they're doing different than Hollywood with Hollywood this year than previous years is that when last season with Cliff, basically they used Hollywood kind of the same way they used Hopkins. And so there were a lot of speed outs. And so they was getting volume type things. And they do some work down the field in the intermediate and the deep game. Hollywood is doing a lot down the field. And that is to stretch things out. So 1, if they can hit the deep ball, great. 2, it also opens things up for the tight ends in the run game and things like that. But you can't excuse what's happened the last 2 weeks from their receivers. And this game, it was 4 catches for 20 yards. 0 catches for Hollywood, 0 catches for Michael Wilson, when the 2 of them were the biggest contributors on offense against the 49ers in week 4. Hollywood had 7 for 96. Wilson had 7 for 76 and 2 touchdowns, and they were non-existent. They combined for as many catches and yards as you and I did, and that's not good when your job is football.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've watched it yet. I rewatched it already. There weren't a lot of plays where you're like, oh, he missed Hollywood. Oh, he missed Michael Wilson. Like, most of the plays were borderline, like, ugh. Like,
yeah.
What is, like...
Yeah, well, there was one play down the field. Wilson didn't track the ball. There were a couple of throws that... there was one throw that I guess it was an out that Kyler threw 2 out. There was the end zone throw that Wilson couldn't come up with. Wilson didn't look good. And it was the first time all year we've seen him play, and he was like, oh, no, he didn't look good. But it was also his first game back after missing 3 in a row and 4 out of 5, and his shoulder was better. But and in fairness, and in kind of going back to what we were talking about, why the run game was open, why they didn't have loaded boxes, is because the 49ers knew going into that game. They looked at the tape from the first game and they saw Hollywood and Wilson beat them. And so they probably stayed more shell as a result of that, and said, well, I don't think they're, like, if you look at that strategically, their defense isn't going to stop us. We're going to score points. And so if they just run the ball, they're not going to have enough possessions to outscore us.
Right, and there was no doubt about that, and it was an interesting choice by the Cardinals. But I mean, at the end of the day, too, you have to look at it and you go, okay, well, the reality is we're not going to stop them. So if we just play keep away, and again, you can't just go in and be like, well, you took the 10 points off of turnovers off the board, because that's part of the game. But like, that's a huge thing in that game. So we'll see how it worked out and everything, but. It's difficult to watch this game and not see not see the warts, right, and the issues, and the first one is clearly that they just don't have any playmakers at wide receiver, and it's tough because whether or not we're Greg Dortch fans, doesn't matter. He's at best probably a wide receiver 4, and there's nothing wrong with that. Those are very productive, long tenured wide receiver 4s in the NFL, right? He's just not a guy that
definitely should not be your ex.
Yeah.
Nor should Zach Pascal. He should. No. And that's who he was throwing to at the end of that game when he was trying to rally the team back. And he was throwing the ball to Greg Dortch and Zach Pascal. And let's you think about his first year, okay? And they needed receiver talent. This is nowhere near that. That right there. When you take Hollywood out of the mix, and you're just saying your mix of receivers is a rookie, Michael Wilson, Rondale Moore, Greg Dortch, and Zach Pascal, and guess what? That is a garbage group of receivers if you're trying to build a team.
Right, it is. It makes it tough, and that's just the reality, man. Like, it's just not a very good group of receivers. There's not a ton of talent. There's not a
And Rondale is it's a bummer this year because, I guess maybe Cliff knew what he was doing.
Yeah, not put him in those situations.
He's like, we're going to get the ball horizontally and hope he breaks things out. And it's just he's not doing much. And you saw the drop against Pittsburgh. He was great. He had those one big play the 2 big plays that didn't happen. He had the drop and then the touchdown that was called back. But it's just been few and far between from him when Hollywood's been banged up and Wilson's been out. You'd hope that Moore could do more.
Right. No, but you're right. Like you were hoping that there would be more from him and that you would get something, from him consistently, and you just don't get it. And, it's tough, man. Like there's just not a whole lot to be excited about in that situation. And I mean, I guess the exciting thing is, like I said, it's a really, really good time to need a wide receiver, right? Like that's the overreaching positive about the whole situation. So you go from there, right? And then you look at the next thing and you go the defense and you go, well, where do we start?
Yeah, let's do that next. Coming up next on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Let's talk the defense overall, and in the last segment, we'll talk about the pass rush overall. That's coming up next on Rise Up Sea Red. We're back on the Rise Up Sea Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. The defense is, we've got two segments about the defense overall. Let's talk about overall and close then in the final segment when you get to the pass rush specifically. But this defense, we knew it going in. There was just no way the Cardinals were going to have any chance of slowing this 49ers offense, which is honestly so multiple, so talented. Brock Purdy's as of right now, he's the favorite to be the MVP. Say what you want about him as the type of quarterback he is, but he is producing at a high level. After only one incompletion in Week 4 against the Cardinals, he threw 4 touchdown passes on Sunday. They limited the receiver production, but then gave up 187 yards to Christian McCaffrey, and I just crunched the numbers on this, and I published this on CardsWire. It's especially the running back production against the Cardinals in division games has been insane. So we look at 2 games against the 49ers. Christian McCaffrey, all 5 games, the starting running back has gone for over 100 yards, okay? So we had McCaffrey go for 106 and then one for 115. But in total yardage, he had 177 total yards in Week 4 and 4 touchdowns. He had 187 yards and 3 touchdowns in Week 15. So he scored 7 touchdowns against the Cardinals. We know about Kyren Williams. Kyren Williams went for 148 and a touchdown in Week 6. And then in Week 12, he had over 200 total yards and 2 touchdowns. Ken Walker had a pedestrian 111-yard total performance. He had 105 yards rushing. He didn't score a touchdown, but he's healthy again. We saw him play how he played against the Eagles on Monday night, and we know that's coming. And so it's a problem. It's officially a problem, especially when you've got 6 games in the division and you cannot stop their running back. And it comes down to an average in 5 games against the NFC West. Running backs are producing an average of 167 0.4 yards, and 2 touchdowns per game. You're not winning games like that.
No, you're not. No, you're not. And that's, that's just the reality of it. And you go to the defense and you go, and it's easy to say, and it's easy to talk about every week, but you look at the defense and you go, okay, who are guys that you can keep? And the first name off the bat's obviously going to be Budda Baker and Jalen Thompson, right?
Yep.
But
Kaiser White, they're good thing they have him on a 2-year deal.
Yeah, Kaiser White. And then from there, you're like, okay. So let's just run through the defensive front snaps, right? Like we don't have to go through but like Josh Woods, he's
whatever. Yeah, he could be here or not.
Yeah, but if he's a starter again, you're expecting similar results, right? Like
right. If he's in the role that he was at the beginning of the year, fantastic.
Right. Jonathan Ledbetter, again, a guy that we've lauded on this show a dozen times about his ability as a rotational guy, but now he's up in the 70th percentile in snaps played.
If he's your third best defensive tackle, you like that defensive line room,
right? Dante Stills, a guy we both like. We think he's going to be good. probably playing too much right now, but he gives them something that they don't have, and that's an interior pass rush. So a guy that, again, you're going to keep, you're excited to see his growth. And even if this is as much as he becomes as a, 5th, 6th round pick, that's a huge, huge win. Like you're talking about a guy that, okay, maybe instead of 30, 40 snaps a game, he's back into the, teens, maybe hits 20s, and you're okay with that 100%. And that's a 6th round pick. That's a big win. Roy Lopez, again, a guy that, nice story, local kid. If he's playing, if he's playing 30, 40 snaps a game, it's a bad situation. Not anything wrong with him personally, just, again, a 6th round pick that's bounced around the NFL. He's playing a lot more than he needs to. And when Roy Lopez is playing 500 plus snaps in a season, guess what tends to follow? You have a bad defense. Like
and he's a fine NFL player.
100%.
There's nothing wrong with having him on your team. He just needs to be 4th or 5th defensive tackle that you're playing.
And then so now we're getting, so those are the guys that are playing a lot. And now we're getting to a guy like Kevin Strong. Again, another guy that not a bad NFL player. It's no coincidence that he's bounced around a lot, and it's no coincidence that he's played his career high in snaps. And by the way, if you go through all the defenses he's played for, he's never really played for a good defense. And again, it's not a shot at Kevin Strong, but like when he's getting high level of snaps, especially the last 2 years, over 300 with the Tennessee Titans, and then now over 400 with the Arizona Cardinals, you're not surprised to see that, and then we get kind of to the bottom. You got, Naquan Jones, again, fine guy, probably doesn't even be getting a lot of snaps. And then you look at the outside backers, and it's the same thing, right? Victor Dimukeji's come back down to earth. Jesse Luketa,
special teams guy. He's a roster glue guy. He's a good guy, but playing much on defense.
Yeah, BJ Ojolari really has kind of hit that rookie wall.
Yeah, he's the one guy you're like, okay, yeah, he's talented,
right? And but not unexpected that he played he's played in every game. He's at 300 snaps, and I know people will be like, well, that's not very many, but like
he didn't play hardly at all to start the
year. Right. And so like his snaps have revved up so much you look at the last 5 games, 37 snaps, 2 sacks, 35 snaps, 1 sack. And then his production kind of just like tanks, and it's not a shock. Like you start to play a lot, you're young, you hit that wall. There's a reason they call it the rookie wall, for a reason. I mean, like, and then, guys we like, Zaven Collins, he's not a pass rush guy. Dennis Gardeck, he's a pass rush only type of guy, right? And then
the problem is, as we'll get to, they're not getting sacks.
Right. And so you're playing these guys, and, Zaven Collins, pretty good guy against the run. Not bad. So what do teams do when he's in? Okay, we'll throw the ball. You look at Dennis Gardeck, and I'm not like making this up. You look at Dennis Gardeck. What do teams do when he's in? Oh, hey, we're gonna run the ball at him. Like, and so that's the thing, is like when you have to play players like a Gardeck or a Collins in situations that they're not strong in, these are the results. And so, you just look at it. It's unfortunate. We knew it was going to be tough, and it's probably a 3-year kind of rebuild. Because like you said, outside of the safeties and Kaiser White, I think you're happy with Garrett Williams' growth, but it's not like you're expecting him to be, your corner one. And then
Antonio Hamilton is very replaceable. He's nice, but very replaceable. And then you can start Thomas, Keitrell Clark. Those are all guys that give you hope. But should you either draft or sign a legitimate, like, no, he's a starter kind of guy, abso-freaking-lutely next offseason.
Right. And that's where they're at. And that's just, I mean.
Well, and honestly, you know what the problem is with the corners is Marco Wilson has failed spectacularly this year.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt about that, right?
If Marco is playing at a respectable level, then their cornerback situation, you don't fear like, but you like we're at the point now. Marco's gone because you know he was playing a lot early on. He was their main number one guy, and there's enough mistakes, and he's only playing special teams now as a 4th round pick. With his athleticism, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with him being a special teams guy. But when you were counting on him to be your number one, he was the guy in line to follow Patrick Peterson and Byron Murphy to be their number one. And his inconsistent play was finally played himself completely out of the rotation. And we know he's not going to be back next year. Especially he's going to be due a big, like not a massive. But he'll be due a nice bump in salary up to about $2.7 million because of the playing time that he's got for the first 3 years of his career. But you feel a little hope and optimism for the cornerback position. And if you look at the game that they had, the corners didn't play poorly. Now that was the thing. We've seen games where the corners are like, ew. Against San Francisco, they didn't play poorly, but again, it's not like they were tested much because it was all Christian McCaffrey.
Right, and that makes it difficult, you know, and you can't get overly upset about it either, right? Because it is the best player in the NFL and the guy that probably deserves to win the MVP over anybody else. And so from that, you know, you just kind of look at it and you just see that this team just lacks talent, and you wonder, okay, how and where do they go from here, and how does it all kind of play out? And you know, right now it's not playing out well. And you know, people are getting upset with Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis, and it's like, well, you know, they're playing the best offense in the NFL. What do you expect from them? So we'll see how it goes. I mean, there's just so much. There's only so much you can do. You know, and obviously we'll talk loads and loads about the draft as the time comes. But like right now, it feels pretty simple to be like, hey, if Marvin Harrison Jr. is there, and you pick third, you take Marvin Harrison Jr. and then you just keep throwing crap and not crap, but like, you know, you keep throwing high-end assets at the defense from there on out. Like if their first 5 picks, you know, all those top 100 picks, and you take 1 wide receiver and 4 defensive players, I don't think anybody's going to really raise an eyebrow, right?
Nope, not at all. Absolutely not at all. Let's move on to the next part. So coming up next on the Rise of Serious podcast, the Best of Cardinals Talk, we're going to continue with the defense, but specifically talk about the lack of the pass rush. No sacks in the last 3 games. That's coming up next on Rise of Red. We're back on the Rise of Red podcast, the Best of Cardinals Talk on the web. If you look at the sack leaders over the last 3 games for the Cardinals, they have none. They do not have a single sack in the last 3 games. Wait, that is the same number of sacks as Seth and I have in the last 3 games, and we don't play football. And when you have guys paid to get to the quarterback, and they're not even getting pressure either. They had 1 quarterback hit. I guess they technically had 2, but Dennis Gardeck's hit on Brock Purdy was an illegal one. So they hit, like, Owen Papo is the only guy that got a hit on.
By the way, I don't agree with that penalty either. Like I'm like, what is the guy supposed to do in that situation?
He hit him. He did hit him high. It was high, and that's the reality in the NFL right now. That he did hit. It was just the wrong place to hit him. It wasn't the timing of the hit. It was just the highness of the hit. So that was not a good way to go. But even still, no sacks for 3 games. We lauded the sack production these guys were getting early on the season, and that has absolutely disappeared. Zaven Collins hasn't had a sack in 7 weeks. Dennis Gardeck, it's been forever since he's had a sack. Victor Dimukeje, the same. The outside linebackers have gotten nothing other than B.J. Ojulari in the last few weeks. From the defensive interior, that pressure has disappeared. And then, like, even before that, it was they got Jalen Thompson had a sack and things like that. And so they're at, and that's honestly, I mean, what can you do? What can you do when you can't generate a pass rush? And I don't know. And they've got
nothing. I mean,
they've got so many edge players, so many. And then they added another one in Tyreek Smith. They got him off the Seahawks, and we'll have to see. But that gives them, what is that? 8 outside linebackers now. Collins and Gardeck, Dimukeje. Oh, Cam Thomas, who has absolutely played himself out of the rotation, which is super disappointing because he was one of the guys that we were most high on coming into this season, and he played only 4 snaps. His production has been non-existent. We forgot that he's there. So you got Gardeck and Collins. You've got Dimukeje and Thomas. You've got Luketa. You've got Ojulari, and I guess that brings you 6. So you got 6 plus now you've got a 7th outside linebacker in Tyreek Smith. I don't know what you're going to do with him, but I guess it doesn't hurt to try something at this point. And he
right.
I guess it's all part of the Buckeye takeover because they drafted Paris and now they got Tyreek, and of course they're going to take Marv, right? So we're going to do the Ohio State version of what Philly's doing with Georgia.
I mean, that just makes it tough, man. Like, if you just don't have anything to throw at it that works, you just have to continue to throw. And this is where, and I don't mean it literally, obviously, but this is where the crap portion of it comes in, right? Like, you are throwing crap at the wall to see if it'll stick. Has not stuck yet, so you're gonna continue to throw crap at the wall.
And you look at the like what might happen next year. Zaven, you're not going to cut Zaven because of his contract, because he's a first-round pick. It's fully guaranteed, and he's played well enough to be a base guy. Okay, he hasn't developed into the pass rush you'd hope, and maybe that one off season wasn't enough. Gardeck, like, you've got Ojulari. Hopefully Ojulari's a starter, but after that, is there anyone that you're like, we got to keep him? No, none of them. None of them.
No, and so that's kind of what you're doing right now. And like you said, a guy like Cam has already played himself out of the rotation, so now you're working through and into different things. And so that's where you're at this point, which is unfortunate. Let's be honest. Like, we had hoped for more and better, and that's just not where it's at. And I don't know if there is an answer or what that answer is, right? Because there's not many choices in this case especially at this juncture of the season, right?
Yeah, that's just the hard part with that. And I'm trying to think, do they have anyone? I didn't even think of this. If they have anyone, even on the practice squad, that you can even consider, giving. Now, granted, like, we know what we understand this. You can't just give a guy snaps. You can't just give a guy snaps because they have to earn it. That it just doesn't work like that in the NFL. You can't. They have to do enough. You have to see enough in practice to even give them even a shot. And so if I go down to the practice squad, and you know what they do not have on the practice squad? They do not have a single edge player.
Yeah. So that makes it even more difficult, right?
Right. and that tells you is that they already have the guys that they kind of like, and they're just kind of rolling with that.
And it may not even be as much as that they like them. It could just be as simple as that they have the guys that they see the most talent in, and that's where they're going until they can find better.
So that'll be definitely an interesting offseason. Now the one thing that we have seen is that because they have gotten sacks, we know that the potential is there. But the problem is, as you've noticed, as you've mentioned yourself multiple times on the show, is that their pressure rate is so low. Their success rate to pressure, their sack rate to pressure was an anomaly, let's say, is what you would call that, because they were producing early in the season. They were getting sacks, but their pressure rate was really, really bad. You knew that was going to come down to earth after, there was tape and this and that, the things even out with the, aches and pangs of the season. But, one of the best ways to generate sacks is to generate consistent pressure. It's a kind of like a lot of other things, like in sales. The more leads you get, the more sacks you'll get, but you're not going. You have to get pressure to get sacks, because you're only mathematically going to finish a certain amount of times, and so the more times that you have the opportunities, that'll be it. But yeah, Brock Purdy did not have to, in either game that he played, did not have to work at all. He just picked apart the Cardinals defense every single time, and the only reason like that it didn't matter is because Pittsburgh's offense is terrible. Then you were playing Mitch Trubisky, who was even terribler for that offense, who now has gotten himself benched for Mason Rudolph for the final couple of games of the year.
Yeah, man. So so then you look at it, going forward is, like you said, what are the options and how do you find it? And that's just what they're going to have to do now. Where do they go from here? What are the options, and where do they find those options? And right now, like you said, I think they're just kind of stuck with whatever they have, and from there, where they make decisions based on where do we go for the future, right? And continue, like, who are guys that we want to continue to see and continue to play heading into next season. And I think those things are where it's at, and that's where they're at right now, and that's how they're trying to figure things out, because it's just not working. And they don't, and like you said, they just don't have a ton of choices either.
Nope, not at all. And with that, we'll wrap up this edition of the Rise of C-Red podcast, the Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web. Episode 497. Seth and I have gone over. This is our review show. We will later in the week have our Cardinals Bears preview picks and best bets, prop bets show later on in the week. I hope to get my boss, Alyssa Barbieri, on from the Bears Wire to do a preview show with her. That way you've got lots of content to take you through the weekend and the holidays. But until a couple days from now, that's Seth Cox. I'm Jess Root. Thanks for listening. We'll be back in a couple of days. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up C-Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms, so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be Red, Sea Red, and of course, Rise Up, C-Red.